Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today for Sunday Rewind, I'm going to be talking about Intensity by Dean Koontz. Intensity is the story of a college student named China Shepherd. She goes home with her best friend to the family farm for a few days, and in the middle of the night, a man breaks into the farmhouse and murders the friend's family. And China, who has a very tragic past, sometimes doesn't sleep well. And so she happens to be awake when all of these things happen. Instead of hiding and cowering and waiting for an opportune time to run or an opportune time to just call the police, China actually sticks her neck out in an effort to save first her friend, and then a younger girl that she learns the killer is holding captive. I read this book 2 decades ago, 20 years ago. It was originally published in 1995. Let me tell you what this book signifies to me. I still remember this book as being the most suspenseful, edge of my seat, holy crap book that I had ever read in my entire life. Like, bombarded with frightening suspense. That's the impression that I've carried with me for 20 years. Basically, Intensity by Dean Koontz achieved some pretty impressive things. And not just because I felt that way. 20 years later, people on Amazon are still writing reviews, the most recent of which is like 14 hours ago, about how great this book is. That to me is impressive. I've chased the same feelings that this book gave me in every thriller or horror that I've read, and I can honestly tell you none have gotten me to the point that Intensity got me. Like, sick to my stomach with fear and suspense. I wanted to reread it to see if I was remembering it correctly, to see if my perception is off, that the person that I was made that decision and it no longer applies. I reread Intensity. It wasn't the same experience. I'm not disappointed in that. I think that's true of everything. I think we have an initial reaction. Our reaction to something the first time around that we've never experienced before is inevitably going to be different than any subsequent experiences we have to it. Did this book make me sick to my stomach with suspense? No, it did not. However, I kind of knew what was going to happen. Did this book disappoint me? No, it did not. I think that this book still drives a new reader insane. Like, this book would still affect someone who hasn't read it the same way as it affected me the first time. I just couldn't relive that experience. I couldn't reach out and grab that experience. It was fun to reminisce. It was fun to reread parts and be like, oh my gosh, I remember how I felt that first time that she's hiding in the killer's RV. Now, there's only so many places you can hide in an RV. Okay? And she's boarded the killer's RV without him knowing it. And it just, oh my gosh. Like, if anything, it was awesome to recall and reminisce over the super intense feelings that I had the first time that I read it. I knew they were excellent devices in building suspense, but because I had already read it, it wasn't building it for me. It's been 20 years since I've read this book by Dean Koontz, and probably not much less time since I've read anything else by Dean Koontz. Maybe 5 years less. Was it always hard to read Dean Koontz? I used to read it all the time, like nobody's business. And I picked up Intensity, and I'm like, this book is hard. This book is hard to read. I didn't remember the language that he uses, like the vocabulary. I didn't realize I had dumbed down so much in the last 15 years. Like, I needed a dictionary to read this book. And maybe I was more forgiving of myself at that age for not knowing what a word was, or having to reread a sentence a couple of times in order to get the actual cadence and meaning of it and absorb it fully. Like, oh, I don't know that word, I'll learn it eventually. That might have been my frame of mind. However, now reading it, I'm like, I'm dumb. There was one word in here that I was like, contextually I can figure out what it means, but infatigably, that's a word. Infatigably is a word, because it sounds like Dean Koontz made up a word. Infatigably, like if somebody does something infatigably. Infatigable, like I can sort of infatigable, someone who is unable to become fatigued, but infatigably, I guess, is an action performed without becoming fit. I don't know. That I am not as smart as I had hoped. Dean Koontz does have really dense writing. Again, rereading Dean Koontz, I realized how stylistic that is. Not being well read as a youngster, I didn't realize that not all writing was as potent, was as verbose as Koontz's writing. And now looking back, I can be like, whoa, chill out just a little bit. Like I could use a couple less adjectives. Objectively, I have to wonder if that hurt intensity, actually, the density of the writing. It seems like that controls pace in a lot of instances, and maybe a little bit less dense writing would have made intensity even more intense. I still liked it. And it's probably a lot due to nostalgia, sentimentality, and that's a possibility, but I still liked it. I just don't think that I have the patience to reread a lot of Koontz now. I think that's the difference, is that my patience as I've grown older, there've been diminishing returns on my patience. And so this time it was hard. Let me see if I can find you guys a good example of how dense this writing is. Okay, here's one sentence. This is one sentence. And it's not even one of the sentences that has like really complicated words or images. It's pretty simple in that regard, but this is one sentence. Vess hurries across the blacktop toward the motorhome, eager to resume his journey northward, to meet the promised storm, to find that best place in the night where the lightning will come in great shattering bolts, where a harder wind will crack trees, where rain will fall in destructive floods. That's intense. Let me know what you think of this one. After picking up the fallen photograph of Ariel, he hesitates, soaking up the atmosphere of aftermath. There is a special quality to a room in which people have recently perished, like the hush in a theater during that instant between when the final curtain falls on a perfect performance and when the wild applause begins, a sense of triumph, but also a solemn awareness of eternity suspended like a cold droplet at the point of a melting icicle. With the screaming done and the blood pooled in stillness, Edgar Vess is better able to appreciate the effects of his bold actions and to relish the quiet intensity of death. See what I mean? So the book is 300 pages of that writing. He's very metaphorical and uses those comparative devices in his writing, and so it just is heavy. It's like a big weight. I think it was Lala at Books and Lala who was talking about you rarely see 4 and 5 star thrillers, and I hadn't really noticed that as a pattern until she said that. And it is kind of true. It's really hard to find a 4 or 5 star thriller out there. And so intensity is over 4 stars, both on Goodreads and on Amazon. And so that's impressive. Is that majorly to do with loyal readers of a well-established author? Perhaps. Or maybe the book just deserves that kind of merit and recognition. I would love to talk to people about this book because, like I said, for 20 years, this book has held a place in my mind as, that book that all other thrillers need to kind of live up to. I want to feel that scared, and unfortunately, I don't. A lot of current thrillers today let me down. I'm still going to be an avid thriller reader. It's still going to be one of the first genres that I reach for. But I have not yet found a book that quite affects me the way that Intensity by Dean Koontz did. So I would love to talk to other people about it and see if they had the same reaction. That's all I have. Those are my experiences rereading Intensity by Dean Koontz. I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.